Okay, let's talk a little bit about bubble diagrams in terms of how things you can do when you're working on this part of the project to help improve your efficiency and your productivity. Um, this was something I did a lot of as an architect when I was out in industry. I did a lot of space planning, and I actually enjoy it. It's just a big giant puzzle. Sometimes when you're working on projects, you already have a footprint of a building, and you're working to put things inside of it, and it's absolutely like a puzzle. But in our case, we're just going to assume that we're starting from scratch. We're not trying to force something to fit into an existing space, and we can lay this out however we would like. And so here's some tips that I have for helping you to work a little smarter instead of a lot harder, right? Um, so you can see here on your screen that I have laid out some bubbles. I did this in Photoshop. I You can work very quickly by hand. You can also work quickly in the computer or software program if you are comfortable and familiar with it. I have been using Photoshop for decades, so I know it very well. And I created these. It took me a little longer to create them in Photoshop than it did by hand. But here's why I did it in Photoshop. And you can do this in any, I just happen to have a license because of the college, but you can do this in any program that you want to work in, or you can get some grid paper and work on a grid. And that is what I highly encourage you all to do. Invest in some grid paper. You could get it in a notebook, so you can do all your work sketching in a notebook and have it in one convenient place that you work in for this course. Or you can get some big sheets of paper. I have some. If you anybody wants to stop by, just let me know, and I can actually give you graph paper, grid paper, big sheets of grid paper to work on. But I did this because this is convenient. I don't have to go find some large space to work on in my studio, right? I can, because everything's covered in other projects. I could do this on the computer. And so what I did was I created a grid. I laid out a grid, and it's not to scale, and I'm not working to scale at this point. Um, I'm very conceptual. I don't want to be too precise at this point because this is still schematic design. And so what I did was I laid out a grid, and then I just had some program that I just threw together. Um, and it doesn't necessarily include all the spaces I would have in a residence, just to show you how I organize these. The human brain organizes best by color. If I say to you, where are the bedrooms? They're orange. You can immediately locate where I put the bedrooms. If I say to you, where's the garage? It's pink. You see where it is. So I like to work with the colors. I find that if I use that language, if I use the same colors for the same spaces, it helps me to work faster because then I know by color moving things around or where things are located. But you don't have to do this. You don't have to work by color. It's just those of us who do find that it makes it easier to see the color, to recognize the spaces, than it is to have to read each and every bubble to search for it. Because we organize by color first, then letters, then numbers. So instead of having to figure out which of those four same size bubbles is the living room, I can immediately look at that color and see that I know that that's my color for living room. And so also, another thing you're going to say I did here was I varied the sizes of my bubbles. This is something that comes from years of practice of just knowing roughly the proportions that a space is going to be. But one of the things that you may want to do is to kind of give yourself a little cheat sheet and go through graphic standards and come up with some general room sizes. And not doesn't have to you don't have to lay all this out quite yet, but you just kind of want to know, for example, that a garage is bigger than a kitchen. and a dining room and a living room. And, living room might be even bigger than the one that I have here. Um, but there are things that go inside of a kitchen, usually, um, that make it maybe bigger than it would be by the time we plan all this out. That include things like pantry space, and often there are stairs that go to the basement that are located in a kitchen, or not, but there could be a laundry room. So a lot of things that are associated with a kitchen, that cause me to make it the same size as a living room. And then dining rooms have just gotten bigger and bigger because people have more and more stuff in dining rooms than we used to. But also hallway between the kitchen, the dining, and the living room. So that gives me some circulation space. So you hear what I'm saying, and that's obviously coming from somebody who has had decades of experience doing this, and I've learned this. There are a lot of aspects of this profession that you just have to learn by doing. Okay, and so bathrooms are smaller. So my regular bathroom is about 8 by 5. I just know that 8 by 5 is a standard bathroom for years and years of doing it. But you can look that up in graphic standards. And so I created these different bubbles that are roughly this size. And actually, I created the one on the right first. I just threw them all together. But then I went over to the one on the left and I started laying them out on the grid. And the reason for that is it makes it so much easier to move from your or to create your other schematic drawings, floor plan, elevations, when you're working on a grid than it would from the one on the right. Because the one on the right doesn't look anything like a house shape at all. It's a mess. It's disorganized chaos. And while that may be great in some circumstances of design, it's not very good for laying out floor plans and elevations. And so I want to encourage you all to, whether by hand or in a computer, to be creative and be loose, but not to be so creative and so loose that you end up creating something that you can't build or creating something that doesn't work. And while there's still a lot that's missing from the one on the left, it's in a much better layout for me to begin to explore developing it further. And obviously one of the things you're going to do is you're going to do multiples of these. You're going to lay these out and start looking at them and see how the traffic flow goes. And you're going to think about them from an area of privacy. I've even laid them out that way, right? So all the bubbles on the top are private spaces. The ones in the middle are more public spaces. And then I just, the garage can flip around and move around. I just located it close to the kitchen because in general, you want the garage and the kitchen to have a connection for multiple reasons. And one of those is often people will place a mudroom that's associated with a laundry room between a garage and a kitchen. Because if you have anything dirty, you can immediately take it from the garage into the laundry room without tracking it through the house to get to that. And the laundry rooms are close to the kitchen. There's a lot of plumbing. It saves cost to not have plumbing running, all over the house. A lot of reasons. So this is just one very quick, brief example to give you an overview of some things you can do when you're working that help you in the beginning start planning for your end goal, which will be a construction document.